So we're constantly trying to educate the public on, like, you don't save any money if you don't have an agent. You actually wind up paying more usually. So I'm excited about where I'm headed because I think it's less scheduled post keeping up with a certain thematic thing and more of a, life is happening and this is what we're doing here. Now life is happening and this is what we're doing here. And now I think we're at this pivotal moment where people want something that's good quality, but they need the authenticity.
Ray Allen, the Mr. Beast of news shows, a wonderful, wonderful human being. What's up, my man?
Hey, dude. How are you?
Good, good. It's bright and sunny up here in southwestern Ontario, Canada. How are things in your neck of the woods?
It is very sunny here. It's, 80 degrees. But our 80 degrees is different from your 80 degrees. Your 80 degrees is probably a nice mild climate, but ours is humid and 80 degrees. And it's a little warm. It's once it gets to like 90 and 100 here, the Arizonans who are used to like 120 degrees of dry heat, they can't stand it. So 80 is warm.
Is the real estate market like super cyclical with the weather down there?
No, I mean, it's kind of historically kind of flat. I mean, there are parts of it that move, like average days on market move. Median price just keeps going up. But as far as like inventory, we have more buyers right now entering the market, but we also have more listings entering the market. And then in the winter, we have fewer buyers, fewer listings. So it's not. I actually did research over 65 years in our area, and the only time it went up a little bit was in March. You saw just a slight seasonal bump in the number of closings, but other than that, it just kind of pretty steady.
Interesting. Well, I guess politics seem to probably have more to play with the real estate market and the economic situation. I know you guys, your GDP seems to be ripping, but it seems like people are still struggle city. Do you think your GDP numbers are an accurate reflection of what people are dealing with down there day to day?
No, I mean, I think people are just extra jobs. I think you have a lot of people right now that are struggling to make it with one job, struggling to make it with their single career, that are finding a side hustle or something else to do and make a little bit of money. It is interesting, our Fed here, I guess your Fed kind of does the same thing. I'm not sure, but our Fed here has two main jobs. One of them is to maintain full employment, and the other is to prevent inflation. So whenever full employment happens, more people are making more money. So then more people are buying stuff. And so the orders for things go up. Well, that's what causes inflation, because now the factories or producers, whatever has the thing, can't produce the thing as fast as it's needed. So the price goes up. So they can start getting it from other places, all kinds of stuff. And that is inflation. So what the Fed has to do is take money supply out of the market to shorten the expansion, or to actually condense or contract the expansion of those companies, so that they don't hire as many people, so that people don't have as much money to buy things, so that things don't continue to go up. But we've enjoyed low rates for so long, and it's been such a great economy for so long. Even through the COVID, it was, a lot of people were fine. I mean, they were making more money in a lot of cases. So I think, you have years and years and years of that stacked up on top of each other. And now inflation, everything's more expensive and people are amazed by it. But it kind of reminds me of my childhood. Like when I was a kid, we didn't go skiing all the time because that was expensive. That was the stuff that like rich people did. Well, I get older and I'm like, oh, we can just go skiing whenever. It's not really that expensive. Well, now it's starting to be more expensive because of travel and lift tickets and everything's starting to go up, food. And now it feels like, oh, okay, now I see why my parents are like, no, we're not going to the mountains all the time. But I just think it's kind of a return to the old days right now. And stuff's more expensive. So people are trying to figure out a way to make more money. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon. People aren't going to lower their prices.
No, definitely not. I'd say we're seeing the same thing here in Canada. I also think like when we were kids, our parents were paying, 10, 14% interest rates on homes. And it made a whole lot of sense to go put your money in the bank, because with the high interest rates, they were also getting high yields, and it was a saving economy, right? Like the old adage of you make $100, make sure you're saving 10%, tithe 10%, so on and so forth. That made a lot of sense because the compounding interest on that $10 was something significant. The problem is over the last 10 years in our economies was with free money, if you had your money sitting in the bank, you're actually losing money. That $100 that you put in the bank
Right.
over time, if it just sat there, you'd be like, well, how's it $97? Like I left it there for 5 years, right? And I think it's a big adjustment. I also think that the same conversation around leverage, like it got so dangerous in our markets. People were just saying, refinance your house, spend everything you have. Like that's great. They built entire businesses, not on cash flow, but on debt. I think that Piper came, and I think is being paid now. And I think everything that happened in 2020 to 2022, if you actually look at it, there's a guy named Benjamin Tall that talked about this from an economic perspective. And he said, we're amortizing what should have happened from 2020 to 2025 over that period, right? I think that balancing is going to continue.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I love that take on that. Who said that? Say the name again.
Benjamin Tall. So he's an economist for CIBC. Phenomenal guy. You'd like him a lot. He's got a lot of charisma, but he really just looks at the facts and then lays it out. And he was the one that has been saying June since last year in terms of our rates dropping. And I was literally touting the same line, saying, when I look at what's happening in the marketplace, this was last year. Everybody thought it was going to be fall last year. Then they thought it was going to be spring this year. Things were looking up. And I was like, I don't think it's going to happen till June. And then sure enough, the Fed here just dropped the rate a quarter point, which
he pinpointed it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, super interesting, guys. So I guess the future of real estate in the States, Canada, I want to get into how you're advising people on decisions they're making today for what you think the future of real estate looks like in the next 5 or 10 years with your team down in your area.
Yeah. So I started real estate in 2007. Back in my day, I'm almost one of those agents that could say 20 years ago. So yeah, I started real estate in 2007. And at that time, right when I started, you were seeing people that could buy a house and 2 to 3 years later, turn around and sell the house. No problem. Then of course, what happened in 2008, everything went down until probably 2012, 2013, it started to kind of recover here. In that time period, people would buy a house and they would have long-term plans of staying in that house. They would know that if I'm buying a house today, I'm not going to sell it in 2 to 3 years, because if I tried to sell it, I don't know where I'm going to be on this dip. We know it's going down. We don't know how low. And so people's buying habits drastically changed. Now, if you look at the median, I think in the States, it's 13 years is the median time that somebody stays in a home. It wasn't like that in 04, 05, 06, 07. Almost everybody you talk to was leaving or moving after 2 to 3 years. Very transient, but sometimes they would stay in the same community, but they would move a house. So now we kind of went through this really nice period where you could buy a house, and in 3 years or so, you could get out with no problem, get out from under the house. You could sell the house, make a little bit of money on it, and reinvest your equity into the next home. My question that I am asking my clients now, that has more significance than it used to, is how long do you plan to stay in your home? Because if they say 2 years or 3 years, 3 years is kind of the point where I'm like, we're going to have to get a good deal in this house. It used to be 1 year. Like, oh, we're going to stay 1 year. Well, you could buy it, but you're going to have to get a pretty good deal. 2 years, you're going to make out fine, right? That's how it was, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? And now we're looking at a situation in which if you don't plan to move for 5 years, I could say you're definitely going to be in the money, I feel like, because home prices are going to continue to increase. We don't know what rates are going to do. But the question is, what's the rate of increase? Because we had this hockey stick graph up, are we going to see a slowing of the rate of increase that almost plateaus for a little while? I don't think home prices are going to go down because there's just not enough inventory. But are we going to see a plateauing if rates stay high? Yeah, probably. So if somebody buys a house today and it only goes up 3 to 6% over the life that they have owned it, are they able to get out from under that and buy whatever they want to buy next? And that's a big question. So we're being real, picky is not the word. I guess just intentional is the word. We're being very intentional with our buyer clients, making sure that they have kind of long-term plans where they're headed, or, that's the intent at least. People always get into situations. And we're also looking at things like today, actually, we took a field trip, team meeting, and we went to a local wholesaler that sells like flooring and countertops and cabinetry and all that kind of stuff. And we kind of got an update on the prices. Like the last time I bought flooring for myself. I could get the flooring for $1.50, and now it's like $7 a foot.
It's wild.
So we kind of updated all of our mindsets around pricing, but it also enables us to look at possibilities in a limited inventory situation and consult with our clients about how to make that home theirs. Because I'm seeing properties that are sitting on the market right now that are selling for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 below where they're currently listed. So if I'm showing a house and my client's like, well, I love it, but I'm going to have to do the countertops. I'm going to need, new flooring in the kitchen. Then I need to be able to do some fast math to estimate for them so that we can put an offer taking that into consideration, because we may not find a house that matches the right lot, layout, and location. Like, that's the main stuff. That's the hardest stuff to change: lot, layout, and location. If you can match those three things, then everything else about the house you could change. So then the question is math. What's the price? And so that's how we're kind of analyzing the properties and stuff for our clients and trying to help them make good decisions.
I love that. I'm smiling because I was with a client this morning, and one of my favorite lines, you can steal this, is asking a client, okay, tell me, is this a 1 out of 10? Seven's not an option because seven's not an answer. And they'll say it's a 3, it's a 6, it's an 8, right? And I told them, never in my life have I ever come into a 10, ever. And by a 10, I mean location, price point, and the house. And this one we were looking at, I'm like, the lot was an 8, maybe some water issues that we got to make sure aren't in place, or watershed land, right? The house was like a 3. The combined number was probably a 6. And I said, the goal in what we're doing isn't actually to find a 10, because we're never going to find a 10. We're going to find a 6 that we're going to turn into an 8 or a 9, and we're going to get there by price. And bringing those factors together. I also think this segues nicely into, like, what is the actual role of a real estate agent? Because before it was like just access to listings. And then I'd say for the last 20 years, it was like access to sold data. And I could tell you what your neighbor house sold for. Now everybody knows where it is, and they can get algorithms that tell them approximately what their house is worth. I think that the value of a good real estate agent is interpretation of data, because if you're just setting up a portal for people to find their own house, you're already out of business. Like, would you agree with that sentiment, or how are you coaching your team?
I would say I would go one step further, because I've actually had really good luck with AI interpreting data. I actually use it. I would say it's to know what data is important to interpret. Mm-hmm. So I give, I use ChatGPT all the time, every day. It's actually up on my screen right now.
So
and
my home button on my phone is actually now AI. So I have a voice conversation with it.
Yes.
Throughout the day.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so great. And now it's integrated, the new OS. I cannot wait for that to come out. So anyway, one of the things I do is I gather data, and then I feed that data to ChatGPT and ask it to analyze the data. And it does a pretty good job analyzing the data and telling me the facts. And then I'll say, okay, how would you advise a seller that is in this market, in this city? And it does a pretty good job interpreting that data into almost like a story, like, hey, this is something they should consider. Here's questions they should ask, all that stuff. What it doesn't do a very good job of doing is knowing what piece of that information is most important to that client and makes the biggest difference for them. And I think that is a key differentiator in the personal application of the data and interpretation to that specific need, versus just, here's the analysis, here's the interpretation of that analysis. What's the seller or buyer going to do? Like, they're reading it, but even though they're reading it, how does that apply to them in their situation? How does that inform the offer that they're going to have to make? How does that change the terms that they're going to have to move with? That's kind of the next step. It's less the interpretation, more the application of that interpretation to their specific circumstance. That's going to be the role of the real estate agent. But in order to know that, you're going to have to know the data. You're going to have to understand the interpretation, and then you're going to have to understand your client, where they are, and then to make that application, that takes way more skill than just giving them the data.
I'm going to go one step further from your one step further, because when I contact somebody, I'm paying for them to know what I need before I even need it. Right. So if I'm talking to a really good financial advisor, whether it be life insurance, accounting, tax, like, I am paying you to tell me what I need to know about the tax law without me going out to learn it. And in our space in real estate, quite often the client I was talking to today, he has the ability to buy the house all cash, doesn't need financing, and literally tear the house down and build a house for his son. But I said to him and his wife, if you do that and you put $1 million house here plus your $500,000 lot, you're not going to sell this house for $2 million. So you're not going to make a profit because you're still going to have to pay me and all the other costs associated with that. So now we're having a conversation about, well, what is the 10-year plan for your son, this property, his lifestyle, and everything else? And I think that's where you're going with it. I think it's fun because we're going back to being craftsmen and women at what we do, where I find we did get away from that and we just were literally just salespeople. I think there's such an art to this business that gets missed by the majority of people out there.
Yeah, I think through the years, I guess we could call it, what are we going to call that time period historically? The pandemic years? I mean,
the pandy? That's what you used to call it.
We had to call it the pandy for a while because YouTube would like just go and crush your reach if you said pandemic or.
For sure. Well, BLC 63 is coming, so Trudeau might take us down if we start talking about this too much.
Well, there was the Spanish flu time period too. That was maybe they'll just call it the disease. Anyway, we during that time period, I think a lot of agents turned into like for lack of a better term, a builder rep for resale homes. Mm-hmm. They would walk around, they knew it, they knew how to get what the client wanted, but they were just basically walking their clients through homes knowing that, hey, there's a limited number of these. If you want this one, let's put an offer right away. And it's a very different situation now. It's way more of a consultation approach. There are conversations that we're having now that we did not have in the last 3 years that are about where they're moving to and how it's going to work. And I don't know if it's because the budgets are tighter, people are asking more questions, or if they feel the inventory is shorter, so they're stressing the details. I don't know what it is, but the conversation has changed. Maybe it's even the perception of real estate agent has changed to where whenever you have a pro in front of you, you recognize that and you ask them questions versus somebody that just sticks a sign in the yard. I don't think they're going to get the time of day anymore. So it is drastically changing. Just practically, I mean, a lot of what we were doing for our listings as far as video outreach and social media posts and that kind of stuff, we're now doing on the buyer side. We started doing that during COVID and we're continuing to do that. So, we're putting geo-targeted videos around talking about our buyers and what they're looking for. We're trying to work with other agents in the marketplace, finding inventory that's not yet listed. We're keeping a database of, we call it off-market properties that we can, take our clients to. So I think there's a lot of practices that we just kind of, I guess, took the market for granted. Like, hey, there's enough properties here and there's enough buyers overflowing. If I miss a couple of buyers, it's fine. It's not like that anymore. It's much tighter. And I think it's tighter for the agents because there's a smaller pie. And I think it's tighter for the consumers too, because they just don't have the money to, oh yeah, we'll offer $10,000 over, or no big deal. I mean, that's what it was like 3 years ago. And now it's like, I don't know if I can make this work. We're $1,000 apart. Wow. That's such a different time. So it's different. It's changing in a lot of ways, but I think the advisor role is going to be more important than ever.
Yeah, I think it's going to encourage people to niche down and work with the clients that they actually are excited to work for and almost obsess about their craft for, right? Let me make an example. What I mean by that is, say you had 15 or 20 clients that you were working with previously, that maybe got whittled down to like 5. And those 5 people can choose to work with whoever's going to bring them the best skill and deployment of time. And a lot of agents have turned around and said, you know what, I'm going to work with less people, but I'm going to provide them more skill and more of my time because the marketplace is going to demand it, right? Even sellers, like, the amount of time a listing will last on the system, it requires a boatload of effort. I think there's an other end to that spectrum where the lawsuit with NAR in the States and everything has changed how real estate agents are approaching the client relationship. And to me, the ones that actually have a lot of skill and are willing to devote time to a client are putting very hardcore parameters around what they do for other people. Case in point, we discussed with our team, they're out there doing calls right now. We just did training on prospecting. And I said, basically, you're only going to get 3 types of prospects. One is, why'd you call me? Never call me again. I hate you, which is whatever. People fill out forms on Facebook and you call them and they get upset. I don't understand that. Whatever. They're out of the database. So you're going to have a nurture or you're going to have a hot prospect. And a nurture is somebody that maybe hasn't indicated that they're ready to buy now, and it's a long-term kind of relationship. Send me some general information that you're sending everybody else, and I'll decide if I want to work with you, right? Or whatever that looks like. A hot prospect is, yes, I'm buying and you're my guy, or you're going to earn the opportunity to be my guy. And this is where we draw the line. Is similar to with NAR in the States. In Canada, we had Tressa launch December 1, 2023. And it changed the nature of relationships where I'm like a financial advisor now. I have a document I have to show you, and I have to sign you to a buyer rep agreement before we engage in any type of working relationship. And I actually think that the agents that have a lot of time and skill are going to be able to justify a conversation of me saying, hey, Ray, I would love to give you advice on that shoreline allowance for that lakefront property. Are you working with an agent? At which you say yes, at which I reply, appreciate that so much. Have your agent give me a call because of Tressa 2023, I can't make any representations for you. That's what your agent is for. Where before, the consumer would pump agent after agent after agent for information, have them running around doing everything. And I think that's how the agents are going to find their time back, is realize who they're actually working for, not just being there to work for everybody, right?
So this is how it differs a little bit in the States. If somebody calls and let's say they call on my listing, and was that an example that you used of your listing and their representative?
Very recently.
Oh, wow.
Somebody came to an open house. Actually, their agent wouldn't drive to show the listing because she's out of town agent and she's brand new, and asked one of my agents information that is critical to an offer. And I'm like, you can't tell them that information, right?
So in the States, it's a little different in that we have our client's best interest in mind, and we only have to deal honestly with the other party. We don't have to deal fairly with them. So when a buyer calls a listing agent, and this is what we keep trying to tell buyers this, when a buyer calls a listing agent and they're talking to that listing agent and that buyer is not represented by that agent's goal is to get as much money as possible, as much information as possible from that buyer that they then take that information and give to the seller. So when, if you're talking to a good listing agent, which I am one, that listing agent is going to make you feel like you're getting all the wonderful information that you should have about the property. And they're going to be real personable and ask you some friendly questions like, oh, great. Did you just find this property or have you been looking for a while? And you're going to say, oh, we've been eyeing this one for a while. And that listing agent's going to say, well, that's wonderful. Well, when would you like to see it? And like, they're going to really sweet talk you. And they're asking you all these questions that basically is determining how high your price is going to go. And you're not represented. Now, if you were represented in the States, it doesn't matter. If you make the call, it is your fault, Mr. Buyer. So I can talk to you all day long and tell you everything that I want to tell you and ask you all kinds of questions. And then to be good in the real estate community, I should probably call your agent and say, hey, by the way, your client called about this property. They're wanting more information. I gave them the information. Let me know if they want to put in an offer. Meanwhile, I've got all the information about that buyer's situation. I know when they need to move. I know that their lease is up in 60 days and they're hurrying to find a property and there's nothing else they like. Everything they told me on the phone, I know. And so in the States, it's almost this huge detriment if you don't have representation, or if you have the representation and you don't use it. You don't put them to work. They're not calling on your behalf. They're not doing the job that they should do. So we're constantly trying to educate the public on, like, you don't save any money if you don't have an agent. You actually wind up paying more usually, because that agent is usually a pretty good negotiator. They negotiate deals every month at least. I mean, hopefully somebody's doing at least one deal a month. And so if you have a really good negotiator who is a listing agent and you're not represented, you're open. You're an open book if you're a buyer. So that's a really interesting difference in US and Canada there.
Yeah. So going back to the two types of relationships, actually it used to be three. So you used to be able to do client, customer, self-represented party. And now it's only client or self-represented party. And if a self-represented party comes in and indicates they are a self-represented party, you cannot offer them any services. You can't draft a contract for them. You can only advise. So wait a second. You can act in the best interest of your clients. You can accommodate a showing and so on and so forth. But say, what is a service then becomes a conversation. So drafting a contract, you could say is a service to your client, but in order for you to provide a piece of advice on a condition or a date to put in the contract, that's a service.
Yeah.
So it gets into this really big gray area. I haven't seen a single self-represented party approach us in this instance. When it comes to another agent's client coming to one of our properties, I tell my sellers and my buyers the same thing. I said, if you're washing your car and somebody comes across the street and starts asking you a whole bunch of questions, education level of a fifth grader, give them my card, don't answer anything, because they're going to ask you leading questions, which are going to come back in negotiations. Because I said, I'm going to do the same thing for you. So if a client comes in and they come to an open house, I'm going to be asking them, do you have a house to sell? Do you have to go here? Do you have to go there? So on and so forth, especially if they're working with another agent, and do exactly what you said. Contact that agent, get the deal in the chamber. Where our agent really asked me the specific question was, in terms of buildability of vacant land on waterfront properties, there's this 100-year erosion line that comes into place. And then there's a limited area where you can build, and then any one zone beyond that. And where we really had the conversation in depth, and I think consumers are going to start realizing it, is when you're asking for strategic advice, you absolutely want to make sure the person who's giving you the strategic advice is your advisor. It's not somebody that is representing another party. To your point, I think educating the consumers on this is so important, because the same guy I talked about this morning, I explained to him, he's got a private deal that he's working on right now, but he doesn't realize the value of having extended parties in a negotiation to achieve more in a sale, because they have that deference of authority or the ability to translate a message through another party and have it received tactically to achieve the result that they want to achieve. And you may be paying that person $40,000, $50,000, $100,000, but if you get $700,000 more for your property, would you do that deal? And I think every educated consumer out there would say yes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I think you hit the nail on the head. Educating the consumer is going to be more important than ever, especially with the, in Arkansas, it hasn't really changed that much. The biggest thing that changed here is that the commission's no longer spotted in the MLS. That's it.
That's wild to me. I don't understand that, because to me, that is less transparent for the consumer.
Yeah, that is less
not
transparent.
Seeing I don't understand that ruling, to be quite frank with you.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to prevent steering. Okay. So what they say is, well, because the buyer has an agreement with that agent, then that agent knows what they're getting paid and will not steer the client to places where they pay more or less. However, the client themselves would, because if the client's like, well, whenever I'm buying a house, I want somebody that's going to pay your fee. Now I am steering on behalf of my client to properties that will only pay my fee.
Yeah.
So yes, it's going to happen. You can't stop that from happening. But what I guess they're trying to stop is like this maybe open-ended compensation window where an agent can just take whatever the seller, and so the seller can be like, I'll give you 10% if you sell this thing for this price. And then the agent goes and shows that property rather than others.
It's a marketing fee. They can do whatever it is, but at the same time, like, it's such a small number. It's a very small number of bad actors that created the situation. We had this exact same thing happen here. So check this out. We had a new rule change in 2024 that I can no longer advertise an exclusive listing that's going to go on the MLS until 3 days before it goes live. Before, it used to be, I think, 5 days once your sign was up, but I could advertise it for weeks. And the reason why I would do it is I would send it out to my agent list. I'd have email campaigns. I'd be like, hey, Ray, I got a beachfront property coming up in Grand Bend, or I got a commercial building that I know you may be interested in. It's not ready yet. We're still doing the marketing, prepping everything. But if you have anybody, let me know. And we would actually reach tons of people. We would cooperate like nobody's business. But the reason they instituted the policy was all the bad actors doing the sales before it hit MLS, and they tried to put some pressure on a small group. But guess what? They actually ended up hurting the industry as a whole, because I can't share my inventory like I used to. And I'm probably going to double in more deals because they're great assets.
Exactly what's happening.
Well. So anyway.
Same thing happened here too. They took away that coming soon now has to be input into the MLS within 24 hours of signing the listing paperwork, unless the seller says, no, don't put it in yet. So in all of our agreements, this is so stupid. In every single one of our agreements, we have boilerplate that goes in that says property will not be marketed publicly until photos and videos are complete and seller okays going live.
Yeah.
So now I have all kinds of hidden inventory. We got 5 listings going live soon right now. and I can't talk about them publicly, but I could tell
So crazy.
everyone in my database. I could tell anyone in my brokerage. They allow people to tell people in their brokerage, but I can't tell anyone in the public. So
Same
they're
thing here.
actually making it worse.
Yeah.
If I could tell the public, hey, this is coming up, then that's open and transparent and more people know about it. But they don't want me advertising it yet. I do not understand that. It's making the problem way worse. The biggest problem we have right now is there's 1 or 2 brokerages that tries to keep everything in-house, and it will go live on the market, and we don't know if our offer is actually being presented or not in some cases.
Yeah.
So that's the issue. It's not an issue of, well, Ray's got a listing he's talking about on Instagram. Oh, who cares? It's public. Let people, if they want to know about it, they can follow me. Ray Zorbeck, RAYZORBACK. You know what I'm saying? So now we have to find sneaky ways to do it, right? So now we take behind the scenes photos, right? And I'm in a house and people will comment, oh, that's a really great house. Well, they reached out to me. Now I can tell them about it.
Say it's the exact same here, and it blows my mind because I think the MLS platform here is a platform at the end of the day, right? Like we're part of 3 separate boards, all 3 are disjointed data feeds. It's a mess. They all get joined into one massive data feed on Realtor.ca and a few other remarketing websites. But at the end of the day, when it comes to consumers and my team, I talked to my team and I said, the platform we've built, our email list, what we do on the social side of things and the digital advertising, I track it per capita. And I can back this up with data. We get 5 to 10 times the amount of leads and views from my marketing as MLS. And, we had one recently where I think the new data I presented this morning is 934 views on the Realtor.ca and like DDF feeds. And I think up to this point, we just relaunched it at price reduction. I think we got 42,024 leads off what I did. I'm like, it's not even close. And I think what the MLSs are going to end up doing, but this is my problem with it, is they're trying to force people to pretend that they're the only option out there, and they're limiting consumers' choice.
Right.
I love the MLS. A lot of my business gets done there. But at the end of the day, if they force me to find another option, I'm going to create my own platform that is going to be more powerful. And if I'm still selling and achieving results, then my clients may not necessarily care as much about the MLS. And I think that what they'll end up doing is making themselves less relevant, just like boards and everything else that's coming out of all the chaos from the last year, right?
Yeah, I haven't had this question in years, but I had somebody that said, you're going to list it in the MLS, right? Because I was showing them everything we were going to do. And I said, yes. And they're like, okay, what does that do? And it showed them on average, like you'll get 500 views in a 30-day period. And they're like, 500? Why do you list it in the MLS? And I had to explain to them, well, let's say the average buyer agent's working with 5 people, right? If you get 500 views, it's usually like 300 unique views. But let's say you get 500 unique views, well, that's 2,500 buyers. So that's pretty good. And then they're looking at my numbers and they're like, still, your numbers are way better. I was like, yeah. So as a seller that kind of got it, like we're way outperforming somebody that sticks a sign in the yard and puts it on the MLS. But I like the MLS. I like having the database, but the database is only as good as the worst agent that's inputting the information, honestly. So even some of the data is not right. And I'm all the time like submitting corrections, like it's the wrong subdivision, that's the wrong zip. And that's a little tiring. So they're going to have to come up with a better system. I can't wait until the MLSs start to integrate AI. So I could just start to type the address and then it pulls all the information from all the different sources and fills all that stuff in for me. And I can just be, yes, thank you. Let me correct these couple of things because I'm a pro. But that's it. It's that I can't wait for the updates. But, how long is that going to take to happen? Because that's somebody's job there that'll be replaced and they're, so-and-so's nephew's cousin's granddaughter. And it's the politics of it, man. The politics and bureaucracy wrapped up in any of that stuff just slows down the progress so much.
Well, I think that's coming to a head in all things, right? People see it in education, healthcare, real estate, everywhere else. And it's the one roadblock that's causing costs to be as high as they are. It's these inefficiencies. And don't get me wrong, I think data integrity is the most important thing, along with collaboration. Like I want one system where we all share, I don't care what board you're on. Sure, you're from Toronto, you want to sell a house in London or Grand Bend. I don't care. Some agents get freak out about out-of-market agents, and that's why they want to protect their boards is, well, I don't want these guys coming into our market. I'm like, dude, they're going to come anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Just be better. Like it's not super complicated. Just be better and it won't matter. But at the end of the day, where I think it's going is somebody's going to create a better mousetrap. And if somebody creates a
Yeah.
better mousetrap that is one board and everybody decides that this is the board that we're going on and we're not going to worry about segmenting data and everything else too, and consumers adopt it because they already are. There's marketing companies like Zillow, and there's one up here in Canada that consumers are using because it's a better user interface already. Well,
Yep.
that proves the point that, you're going to end up hurting the industry unless we all get on the same page.
I would love to have a national MLS,
Yeah.
just one place. And it's everyone's like, oh, it's so hard to get all the boards on board. Yeah, but you could go to a national real estate company. Like you can go to, I'm with Real Broker. You can go to Real Broker and search the nation.
Yeah.
How hard is it to get that? Just, you don't have to, you don't have to dismantle the boards. Just give me one place to go. Like housesintheus.com, they're all there. Yeah. Every MLS, every board, it doesn't matter. They're there. And if you want to contact the person, you got the listing agent's contact info. That's not hard. Why hasn't it been done?
It's what you said. It's the politics of it too, right? Because then people get into, the minutia of it and they say, well, I need these fields in my market. And I need, so build an if this, then that. Like if this is true, if you are waterfront, then these fields apply. If this is not true, then it doesn't apply. At the end of the day, I think it's going to take somebody that comes up with a wicked idea. And actually, when I saw it happening in the States with NAR, I saw that the guy, Mauricio, I think his name was, from the agencies, like, I'm launching my own MLS. And I'm like, well, this is where it's going to go. Like, maybe it's him, maybe it's not him, but eventually somebody's going to come along and everybody's going to buy in and say, all right, the UI is great. This is the system, that there's no angle behind it. We're all buying into this system. And I think ultimately the free markets, just like you were talking about from the commission perspective, will decide what ends up happening short of regulatory or political interference, right?
I just looked it up. Housesintheus.com is available for $0.01. So there you go.
No way.
Somebody go buy
it right now. This episode's not going live for 2 weeks. And then Ray, you're my guy if I open up some offices down there.
I own dumbledores.com.
That's amazing. Did you know I own howwouldyoufixthis.com? And
no, that's a good one.
Yeah, except YouTube exists, so probably don't need that.
That's true. Well, I figured Dumbledores because we could be the wizards of real estate, but man. I'm a little nervous about a Potter lawsuit, so I haven't done anything with it. But man, 75 years from now when that copyright runs out.
My wife wants to kill me. Our GoDaddy URLs come in once a year, and she's like, why do we own all these URLs? I'm like, I have an idea. I just haven't had time.
Did you register as a marketing company or web design company?
No, I didn't. No.
Do it. You get like 20% off or 30% off of something.
Interesting.
It's becoming significant on my end. I've got so many stupid domains.
Well, you can start brokering them too. I'm going down a wormhole, but somebody I got a notice from GoDaddy and they're like, this domain's probably worth $3,000. And I bought it like 10 years ago. So I'm like, well, hopefully that covers the cost of having these domains, but maybe not. But going into the last piece I want to touch on with you too, and I got to get you out of here because I know you're busy. Educating the consumer. So, I mean, we've known each other for a long time. I consider you a dear friend that you could call me for anything. You love content creation. The news show I popped in the other day, Fire, you've stayed so consistent on it. Obviously, we can educate consumers in a way we never did before. How do you think about all things socials, and how do you create content at the level that you do?
That's a great question because it's changing. For a while, it was the most authentic look is the best. You would have just put yourself out there type of content and go live type of content. And then we went through a spurt that was like, actually, if you get lifestyle photos and put that on Instagram, that's best. Then we went through lifestyle photos are good, but just do videos. Put a bunch of videos out there. It doesn't matter what you look like or what you're doing. And then it became more and more professional. There's more and more editors. Then everybody and their dog lives somewhere overseas and they can edit videos and shorts. And then it all started to look the same. Mm-hmm. And now I think we're at this pivotal moment where people want something that's good quality, but they need the authenticity. So I'm actually going backwards in some of my content creation and even considering changing some of it to more vlog style content.
Yep.
And I don't know if it'll work, but it's different. It's long form. It's not short form. And then you cut the long form to create the short form, but it's going to be very different for me moving forward in some of the content that I've been, I've had nice clean buckets for a long time. and I went through my stuff, and all the creators are going to tell you not to do this. So don't do this. But it was just for my peace of mind because I'm OCD. I deleted a bunch of stuff. I'm like, this is really no longer reflective of my brand or where I want to go. So I removed it. And I only have left like the stuff that is still kind of reflective of where I am. I clear out the grid more often than I used to. And I'm cognizant of, I'll collaborate on a listing with one of my agents when that listing's no longer active, sold, or whatever. I remove the collab, and I want to have a history of solds and things like that, but not a history of actives necessarily.
Sure.
So there's a lot of that. I guess you could say I'm paying closer attention to it rather than just taking spaghetti noodles and throwing it up against the wall and figuring out what sticks. Does that analogy work in Canada? Y'all got spaghetti.
Yeah, spaghetti and noodles. Yeah, we have spaghetti.
I was just, by the way, an aside, and then I'll get back to content. Banff is gorgeous.
It's spectacular.
Holy cow.
Yeah. One of my favorite places on the planet, the 1A highway. If anybody goes to Banff Drive, the 1A, we saw a beautiful gray wolf. I got a video of it.
Oh, really?
Massive gray wolf just crossing the highway. So
we went to Lake Louise and got to see it thawing and starting to turn blue. That was really cool. We did the gondola with the hike up there too. It was awesome. I got some really cool 360 shots too. Anyway, that's an aside. I love Canada. Your maple syrup tastes really different than American maple syrup.
That's good.
Legit different. Okay. Anyway, back on content. I previously have had nice, clean delineations between the content, and I'm kind of scrapping all that and just mixing it all together. So it's going to look and it's funny that you asked this question because I've been in this process of like rebirth of content for about a month now. So it's going to look like to the outside person looking in, he's just doing a bunch of stuff. But really, if you start to look closely, you'll start to identify those buckets and interest. Mm-hmm. It's just not a clean weekly show, or it's just not a clean, okay, that post is going to happen once a month. It's just when life happens, and when it happens, capturing it and putting it out there. And so I'm excited about where I'm headed because I think it's less scheduled post, keeping up with a certain thematic thing, and more of a, life is happening and this is what we're doing here. Now life is happening and this is what we're doing here. And it will automatically take the shape of my interest because it will just be life. Mm-hmm. Now, I personally still don't share family, still don't share kids or anything like that on social media. And there's been some recent research now that's come out where kids who are now adults that were shared all over social media don't like it. So they wish that history was deleted. They wish the embarrassing photos weren't for everyone. So, and I'm sure you know this, Justin, like when you're sitting down with your parents and they're like, oh, here's a picture of Justin in the bathtub. You're like, oh, come on, mom and dad. Like,
sure.
Well, these days that picture's online and they haven't had a chance to have that, like, oh my goodness. And now they're 16 and somebody in high school is like showing them that picture on their mom's Facebook profile. So that's the kind of stuff that's like coming back. So I still don't share family. I'm still not going to put all that stuff out there except for the close group, but it will be more in line with life as it happens and less in line with I'm creating content.
I like where you're going with that too. Actually, Benji Travis has a really good course on vlogging. I just did. And I've always thought about my content creation kind of that way, right? Where I just think of what do I do and where do I do it? And then how do I kind of tell that story on a consistent basis? I want to be somewhat thoughtful of, like you said, if you looked at my content or you follow my stories, you probably feel like you get a little bit of everything. You see me on the beach in Grand Bend doing my morning routine because I like fitness and working out. You might see me fishing. You'll see me actually doing listing videos and selling houses. Oh, by the way, he sells farms and commercial properties. And I've always tried to keep a balance of it so that you feel like it's not just, just investment properties all the time, because then I'm just the investment guy, right? And I think people are complex individuals. I also think Gary Vee's new book, if you haven't read it yet, I would definitely read it. He talks at length about this, about how it's not so much about worrying so much about having a polished feed and it looking a very specific way, unless you're like a company or a brand and you genuinely like need the aesthetic. It's about just being real and then tracking what hits and then amplifying what hits. And I can tell you it's working for us organically, because we'll post first. I could care less if I get 400 or 30,000 views on it.
Yeah.
I had one that popped off with a builder. We did a podcast, clipped a piece of podcast, and it was just like this. He was sitting over there. We talked about how if we knocked off HST and the cities would help builders service land, we could make housing affordable again. Super simple, very, very simple clip that popped off. And then I was able to amplify that to that specific audience.
Yeah.
And right next to it was like a clip of me on a farm with Ryan, which was a listing video. And I think you can be a whole version of Ray without it feeling as much like it's curated. Because I think people are conditioned to curated content. Here's another idea. I want your feedback on this. We just made this decision today. And we said, we looked at our Instagram feed, and every friggin' feed is just listed, just sold, conditionally sold, 2 photos of the agent, same Canva templates. And I feel like consumers just scroll past it because they're desensitized.
Yeah.
I said, stop all of that. No more templates, really captivating images of the properties, and then the beauty's in the caption. So we're going to simplify everything so it creates more of an organic feel. Do you think that that's something that would stand out in the sea of just listed, just sold posts?
Yes. And I love the storytelling aspect instead of just sold, just listed stuff.
For sure.
And a lot of times, like, let's think about you want to buy a house. What does a just sold post do to you?
Yeah.
It makes you think, oh, I missed another one.
For
right.
sure.
So it's not a good thing. And also, why would I contact you about this house? You sold it. Like, I don't need that.
Makes the agent feel good that sold it, but that's about it.
Yeah. Under contract. That doesn't do anything for me as a buyer. Sure. Doesn't do anything for me as a seller too, except make less people look at my home because now it's under contract. Yeah. So if we really think about like the impact of each piece of content, I think that's where we're headed. Like, what's the impact of you guys talking about affordable housing? That's huge. What's the impact of you guys saying, hey, come look at this farm listing video? That's different. That's great because you're getting it out there. But I think where we lose it is where we think, okay, what's the impact of me showing my award? Nothing. It doesn't do anything. Yeah. So instead of me showing my award, what if instead I had an attitude of gratitude and thanked my friends and family for voting for me for this thing, or thank them for using me? Hey, because of you guys, this is what I was able to achieve. That's this is a personal aside, and I want to be thankful for where I am, right? That's fine. But if you're just saying we won, like, nobody cares. So I think the storytelling for listings and things like that, I think that's more important than ever. But I also think you need to mix it in. So you may have a beautiful listing video with a wonderful story you're telling about this property, but I think you also need to mix it in with a personal aside about your favorite thing about the property, why you like it. Yep. And it's a personal note from you about that property, because that hits a different audience. I think you need to mix it in with a short about it, a long form about it. So I think you're hitting it from a bunch of different angles, and that's the way moving forward. But I also think there's room to start brand pages. Like, I've always been against 2 accounts. I'm kind of for them now, because if I take this tact, which I'm going on my personal account, which is just going to be a mix of my life, from new listings to, podcasts and things like this that I do, to agent education stuff, to CrossFit stuff, to baking cake and bread and whatever I'm interested in. We're bees. We have bees now. We just got 28 pounds of honey.
Amazing.
Yeah. So everything that I'm interested in is on my feed. So what am I going to do to service clients well and to hit niche audiences that are looking specifically for houses? Well, I need a feed of just that. So my Pixel Properties account is going to be just properties. And now, how do we present those properties? Well, there's videos, there's photos, there's carousel posts. And I think there's room for like news type posts, because those are getting huge on Instagram right now. And for those audio listeners, what that looks like is usually a portrait style post with a photo and a gradient from the bottom that's black going up to transparent towards the top. Then you have at the bottom real, like all uppercase headline. And then you have a little line with your little logo right above that. That is the news format post right now. Now, in a year from now, maybe totally different. But if you format something in that style and put it out there, it will get views. So now I'm thinking, well, how do I service my clients with that? So I think there are certain templates that are tired and old we need to destroy. But I think there's room for templates that are effective and still creative, but they have to be visually appealing or attractive because it looks like news. That's where I think we have to go.
Yeah, I think in my mind, as you say that, I think it needs to remove friction. Like, it needs to serve a purpose. If the template serves a purpose, fantastic. If it helps me zone in. So here's an example: agricultural properties, which we sell a lot of. You really want to know, okay, here's the land, here's the workable acreage, here's the pastures, here's the bush. show me an outline of that too. Show me a template. Like that is super valuable because you're saving me the time of going to figure out all the different components of the property. Right. So I think you touched on so many things there, right? I appreciate you coming. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for that example, just to like high visual appeal, right? So let's say you're selling farmland. Instead of just showing a picture of the farmland and for sale and that kind of stuff, and instead of just showing the details, if the opening photo of the carousel that has all of this information in it is a close-up of corn or grass or whatever, and you almost have like Polaroids that are sitting there of this property, and it's like graphically appealing, I think that's the opener where people are going to go, oh, that feels nice, swipe, and they're going to look at the other parts of the carousel that has all the information and everything else. I'm doing a template right now that looks like news, and then it has 2 charts and graphs, and there's some red marks on it and stuff like that. And what I want people to do is to say, well, what are the red marks, and why do you circle it? And then they swipe, and then they see the story of the things that I'm pointing out on those graphs that they could just see on the first. So I think those type of templates, but it has to be way more visually appealing than it used to be. You can't just show a picture of a house with a sold. That's not going to work anymore. Oh, it keeps doing that.
Yeah, I forgot I left it on. So if you do all the things, you can do all of the motions for Apple. They're just taking off. I found this with my daughter one day. I think I did thumbs down. If you're on the audio podcast and you're listening, we are doing all of the Apple emojis. Ray and I are having a party. But
this is the store.
Again, if you are listening to the audio podcast, make sure to go check out my friend Ray Allen and all the places. When do you do your news show? I do want to get the audience over there.
Wednesday at 11 o'clock Eastern. Wait. I'm sorry. That was a different. I do a lot of masterminds and stuff every week. So Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern is when we go live for the This Week in Real Estate podcast. That is 12 o'clock Central. That's my time zone. So
he crushes it. And it's on Clubhouse. I see you on Twitter, YouTube, all the platforms. Make sure to check Ray out and connect with him as well, brother. I always appreciate our catch-ups. You're one of those guys that I could have on the podcast 5,000 times. There's a million other things that we can talk about, but just wanted to catch up with you and see how things are going in your world, man. You did not disappoint as usual.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, my man. I'll see you out there in the wild.
Bye, everybody.